Hello and welcome back to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, and this is Not Smoldering. I'm joined today by, what are you, distribution manager, Brian Chai, right? Manager of distribution operations.
The distributor of things.
Distributor, right. Distributor cap, Brian Chai, as well as one of our newest writers. Brett, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell our viewers how long you've been here and what kind of things you like to write about for Western Journal.
I've been here for a few months. I'm a big fan of the international affairs in addition to the constitutional issues. I find most times writing about the U.S.-Chinese relations in addition to a number of other things that the Biden administration has pursued on the foreign affairs front.
Brett is making his debut on WJ Live today, and by no coincidence, we'll be talking about foreign policy and China. We'll get to that in just a minute, as well as the latest weird sexual confession from a celebrity that I don't care about, which is essentially all of them except Bruce Campbell. I don't know why these people think we need to know about their sex lives, but she wants us to know. She's a she. You can call it whatever you want. But to start off, let's talk about Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan Democrat, has found herself in a little hot water a couple of times this week, both really of her own making. So you may have heard the story. We reported on it back, I believe, in April, when it came to light that Governor Whitmer violated her own health department's regulations or guidelines. I don't think they were actual regulations. I think they were guidelines when she spent the weekend in Florida with her ailing father. Now, I don't for one second begrudge her the opportunity to spend the weekend in Florida with her ailing father. What I begrudge her is to tell everyone else not to do it and then go do it. Apparently, however, the private plane that she chartered to go down there, because, that's what governors do. They charter private planes. You and I wait in TSA lines and, get patted with the backs of people's hands, but not Governor Whitmer. She chartered a plane which apparently lacked some of the proper authority or proper clearance to act as a chartered plane. So you would think the governor would know better than that, but apparently not. So now the FAA is investigating this flight that Governor Whitmer was on. In the same week, Governor Whitmer, and this is, it's going to be hard for me to say this without laughing. The entire eastern seaboard essentially is experiencing gas supply chain problems. Some states, my own state, I kind of call it my home state, my adopted home state of North Carolina. I lived there for 30 years before I came out here to scenic Arizona.
You came out here for me.
Yeah, because Brian was here, and he's my favorite distributor cap. So, yeah, that's your new title. We'll talk with HR at the end of the show.
Excellent.
So we've got, North Carolina declares a state of emergency. It's not the only state to have done so. There are all kinds of gas supply problems in the eastern seaboard. What a great week for Governor Whitmer to come out, or Whitmer, as some of our folks like to say, and renew calls to shut down the Enbridge pipeline, which pumps over 500,000 barrels of oil under the Great Lakes. And that's her concern with it, that it's aging infrastructure, and she's concerned about a future oil spill, not a current one, a future one that is hypothetical. Now, again, I don't begrudge her the call to address this aging infrastructure. It probably is an issue, or it's going to be an issue at some point.
Yeah.
Isn't yet, but at some point that's inevitable, right? It's not going to last forever. But what bad timing for Governor Whitmer to say, you know what the East Coast has? Too much gas. That's the problem. There's too much gas out there. You may be paying $5 a gallon after waiting in a line for 2 hours for that privilege, but don't worry, Governor Whitmer wants to make it just a little worse for you. You can always just buy an electric car for $60,000. I'm sure that'll be just fine. So clearly Whitmer thinks this pipeline demand is going to help her politically, right? I mean, that's the only reason. She wrote a whole op-ed on the subject. The only reason a career politician, writes an op-ed is because they think they've got political points to score.
No.
But did she? Does this call, on the right, obviously we're going to mock her and scoff at this, at least for, not necessarily for the substance of it, but certainly for the timing of it. But what about with her base? Is this call for ending this pipeline, because she's not, by the way, really calling to repair the infrastructure. She wants it gone. She doesn't like the fact that this oil is being pumped underneath the Great Lakes. Is the timing of this going to hurt her with her base, have no effect, help her? What do you guys think?
This is kind of a cop-out, but I'm going to go ahead and say, I think it will, yes and no as far as whether or not this will help her. I think one of the things in my adulthood that I've noticed with the left is that a lot of these crusades and causes that they champion for, it's basically like flavor of the week. So in the immediate return, I can definitely see Whitmer appealing to some parts of her base, like the very extreme green parts of her base. But I mean, long term, I'm not sure. I mean, right now, the thing people most remember her for, like whether you're left or right, is just Michigan's gross mishandling of the coronavirus,
right,
and the just disastrous policies she enacted. And I'm not sure that in the long run, like if 20 years from now, if we're discussing, Gretchen Whitmer circa 2020, 2021, everyone's going to be talking about that, not this. Everyone's going to be talking about the way she handled things with the coronavirus. So, yeah, sure, she's going to score some free brownie points in the immediate, but long term, I'm not seeing what her plan is.
So that gives rise to an interesting question that I'll pose to you, Brett. Some people have theorized that the CDC removing a lot of its restrictions and easing its guidance here recently was directly related to the pipeline shutdown that was causing such pain particularly on the East Coast or east of the Mississippi. Not only, I should say, not exclusively east of the Mississippi, but particularly that's where we're hearing the most of it. And so there was a specific attempt by the Biden administration to throw some good news out there to distract people from the whole pipeline issue. What Brian just said makes me wonder whether this is a specific attempt by Whitmer, whatever, to distract people, using this issue to distract people from her corona performance. So kind of the opposite dynamic going on there. Do you think there's any possibility of that being true?
I think that's certainly a part of the whole equation. A part of me really thinks that her office and herself, she's corrupted by power. In the coronavirus, her handling of the coronavirus only showed that as a governor, she didn't really give hand to the legislature. She wanted to keep people safe and
which only she could do.
Exactly.
Right.
So
it's her witch powers. That's what she can. She's the Scarlet Witch. I don't know if you knew that.
So building off of that, I think this attempt is kind of like a blowback effect. She's trying to rectify the error she had made earlier on. But in terms of the pipeline, I think it's strategically a very bad idea for her campaign. And in addition to that, it doesn't make a lot of ideological sense coming from the left. This kind of comes after Biden's former cancellation of Keystone. Of Keystone, exactly.
Right.
So it doesn't make much sense. And also, if I may add, the Canadian PM believes that pipelines are one of the most safe and efficient ways to transport fuel.
Probably because they are. That's probably. I don't agree with him all that much, but in this case, I'm on board.
So with the attempt to end the whole pipeline, it doesn't make too much sense from my point of view, because if she was trying to attract those strategic allies, she would be going out and saying we need to reform this pipeline, or we need to rebuild it or restructure it. like the point you
Make
had
it
made, a
safe.
very sound idea.
Sure.
Like if it's 70 years old, I guarantee everybody would be on board with some sort of
Right.
reform effort.
Right.
But yeah, ideologically, I just don't understand. I do think it's thinking backwards in trying to rectify the mistakes she had made earlier in
Yeah.
the administration. And on top of that, I mean, as a governor, if I could say this one thing, her going down to Florida and honestly showing she didn't care about her orders that she had made, and
Right.
all of the citizens of Michigan
Didn't
that had
think
to
they
abide
applied
those
to her.
orders.
Right.
Exactly. It just totally goes against everything that I think people on the right and a lot of sound-minded people just throughout the political spectrum view that these leaders are now seduced by the temptations of power.
Right.
And they don't care if they get caught in a directly hypocritical moment. They just don't care.
Right. It's bad optics. That's the
Yeah.
only thing I care
Yeah.
about.
And
You're right.
like you had said early on, it's just the flavor of the week. All I have to do is get through this week, and next thing you know, I'm fine.
All of a different controversy to cover up.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Brian, we see this kind of entitled behavior from establishment politicians all the time, and I'd love to say it's just a problem on the Democratic Party. It's not.
Fortunately,
it
it's
is. I think, and this may be my bias showing. I don't know. It seems more prevalent to me in the Democratic Party. It seems I am more aware. I am aware of more instances
Yeah.
on that side, but I first of all, would not claim that I know that to be true, statistically, and certainly, it at some level it doesn't matter because it exists on both sides of the aisle, no question. Is there some way to keep people in political office, as Brett sort of alluded to, from becoming part of the establishment, or are we past that point at this point? Is that a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause because of what we just went through with President Donald Trump, where I've been on this show plenty of times. I've voiced my, I think, genuine criticisms of the former president, but at the same time, what he brought to the political arena, I think, can't be understated. And I think that's the part that so many, and to be fair, I think I agree with you. We always hear about the Democratic foibles.
Yeah.
That is what it is. When it comes to Republicans, I think they are taking the wrong lesson from Trump. It wasn't exclusively his bombast or his rhetoric. It was the fact that he was a genuine political outsider,
He
had
was.
no interest in.
Still is, really.
Yeah,
Even
and
after 4 years in the White House. it's still a
exactly.
political outsider.
And when you see people like politicians like a Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz who really channel that Trumpism, sometimes I think what gets lost in that is channeling the insulation Trump built around himself, where he, like you said, I mean, he stared into the abyss and the abyss blinked. That's what DC essentially
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
politicians, when they stare into that DC abyss, it's the old, they become it. And with Trump, that wasn't the case. And I think that is something that Republicans especially, I think, need to learn from. I think a lot of Republicans are getting caught up in the wrong lessons from Trump.
Are you saying Republicans especially because you just don't have any hope that Democrats could possibly learn from it?
Oh, yes. Because just look at. Democrats. Joe Biden was their guy. He was their champion,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get much more establishment politician than Joseph Biden.
Doesn't get any more establishment than Joseph Biden. So, and speaking of Joe Biden and the Trump administration, one thing we've seen serious changes in over the past, what's it been now, 120 days or so of the Biden administration is America's China policy. Brett, you've got some
Yes.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, so recently I did an article on the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and broadly speaking, it's an infrastructure project that was launched in 2013
Right.
with the aim of being done by 2049. Just by that, with that information right there, it's an infrastructure project that's spanning roughly 5 decades. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
The United States, outside of maybe the Marshall Plan and the Dawes Plan, has never offered that sort of
Yeah, and even those plans, while they were grand in scope, they've never had that, decades long.
longevity.
Yeah.
Yes. So, of course, the Chinese Communist Party is out indicating that this is all good. We're just supplying the global
Sure,
south.
it's all wonderful. Sure.
Yeah, with dams, with ports, with roads, with 5G networks, with all of the needed things of today. There is maybe, in my mind, and along with a lot of other Western analysts and commentators, there's a silver lining here, or there's a kernel, something behind the cover. There's an Oz type thing going on here.
Sure.
And a lot of people refer to this as debt trap diplomacy. So what will happen is if I'm China and you're country A, I will give you a loan for a lump sum, a big investment. You will not be able to pay that loan back to me. You will forfeit that loan, and I will take over your dam. So it's very nefarious. Some have called it out, some have not. The striking thing about this whole infrastructure project is roughly 140 countries have signed on already. There are 190 countries in the International Monetary Fund. So this is not some sort of oddball infrastructure. This is a very powerful engine to bring geopolitical change. So coming from the Biden administration, it's very interesting to see their rhetoric with the Chinese party. They have gone lengths to distance any sort of Cold War rhetoric, which is understandable from a historical point of view. It's understandable. You don't want to equate, you don't want to rebrand things. We saw what happened when we branded the First World War the Great War. 20 years later, we had World War II.
The world to end all wars. Okay.
They really missed an opportunity. They should have called it the Greater World War.
So it's on one hand, is this really a new Cold War without bringing in the branding of a Cold War? That's the question I would really like to pose. And then it's important to understand that this relationship, us and China, is different and very similar than the one we shared with the Soviets.
Sure.
So I'll leave you guys the floor.
So, I think it kind of depends on how you're going to define Cold War. In one sense, a Cold War is any conflict in which shots don't get fired, right? There's no huge military buildup, or at least not a buildup of forces facing each other. There was a military buildup during the Cold War, of course, but there was not. With one or two exceptions, Cuban Missile Crisis jumps to mind, there wasn't a lot of direct face-to-face confrontation between the U.S. and the USSR. We used proxies for that. So would this conflict with China meet that very broad definition? I would say it does. There's not a lot of direct military confrontation. There is some. There's always the Taiwan question. There's always the South China Sea question, the military buildup there. China and the U.S. have fought proxy war. Korea, for instance, was essentially a proxy war between the two nations. So, is it a conflict that is essentially bloodless? I guess that's the word I want. Yes. Is it a conflict? Yes. So does that meet the terms of a Cold War? I would argue that it is. I doubt that our State Department wants to call it that. We use that term. The U.S. government used that term, to great effect in the 50s and 60s, particularly, and then the left used it more in the 80s. But yeah, I don't think you'll see a lot of Biden administration officials jumping on the term Cold War. But I don't know what else I'd call it.
Yeah, I think it is fair to call that. It does feel a little different in the sense, almost in a more ominous sense, because of China's just general influence within America. Like, it's not just like, oh, hey, like, I really like Chinese takeout food. No, it's like they own, like massive American corporations. Yes. You find out they're actually owned by like a small billionaire company in China.
Right.
Like,
yeah, or if they're not, they get, their supply line is completely, exists in China or dominated by Chinese influence.
Yeah. So given that, I would disagree with the characterization of a Cold War. Just, I guess, George, you are right in the most literal of definitions. Sure, I'm fine calling it that, but it does feel like something. Something worse. It feels that way because of, like I remember reading a fascinating article a few weeks ago about like what happens if you just take China's money out of the U.S. economy, and it's pretty damning.
Yeah.
Like it is pretty crazy, and to think of that kind of influence that China wields, Whew, yeah. In the most literal sense, yeah, let's call it a Cold War, but it feels like something worse.
The other
to me.
question, the other side of that question, though, is what would happen to the Chinese economy?
Yeah, that's very
if
fair.
the Chinese
Very fair.
pulled all their money out of the U.S., I don't think that would be a positive effect.
No.
But it does. I hadn't thought about this till you were saying that, Brian. But I remember, you guys are too young to remember this. I say that
We'll
a
see.
lot on this
We'll
show.
see.
I say that a lot on WJ Live. In the 80s, particularly, in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of fear about Japanese influence in the U.S. and their economic, the Japanese were an economic powerhouse after World War II, or turned into one after World War II. Japanese cars began to dominate the U.S. market. Japanese electronics were now we say made in China as a sort of derogative term, right? We said made in Japan when I was a kid, but it meant the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Cheap transistor radios, and guys would know what that was, but cheap electronics, TVs and DVDs, all of that stuff was manufactured in Japan. And there was real fear that the Japanese were going to own the American economy in a very real sense. And I'm trying to remember the name of the book. Michael Crichton actually wrote a novel.
The Jurassic Park guy?
The Jurassic Park guy, yeah. That was it Rising Sun, maybe was the name of it? Don't hold me to that. But Michael Crichton actually wrote a novel, and I feel like it was made into a movie with Wesley Snipes, but don't hold me to that either. This is, we're going back decades now. So maybe I'm thinking of Expendables 3. I can't, sometimes I get confused. But obviously nothing came of that either, right? I mean, we are not owned by the Japanese now. There were people literally in the 80s saying by the year 2000, you're all going to be working for the Japanese. That's not an exaggeration. Certainly not the case now. These things have a way of working themselves out through history, I think. And worst case scenarios often don't come to pass. So
True. George, when you were a kid, did you ever have to hide under your desk thinking that would prevent a nuke from killing you?
We did do those drills in school, yeah. Only when I was I think only in grammar school. I don't remember ever doing those by the time I got to sixth grade, which would have been like 1980.
So wow, that's
a
few years before I was
born in 1968.
So you're a pretty smart guy. It never occurred to you to tell the teacher, like, hey, I don't think this will prevent us from, like, if a nuke goes off, being under our desk isn't going to really help us.
When I was in the Army, we were told if a nuclear blast occurred nearby, it was actually kind of an argument. Like, you're supposed to lie down on the ground if there wasn't any cover. And the argument was, do you face it with, like, your helmet pointing to the blast so you have that cover? Or do you face it with your feet? And literally people would go back and forth on this, and finally it was decided, no, you faced it with your helmet, because if the blast was too strong, they were afraid it would get under your helmet and, like, yank your head off. I'm not making that up. I wish I were making that up. I'm not. So, there's only one position to be in when you're that close to a nuclear blast, and it involves kissing part of your anatomy goodbye.
Yes.
The rest of it, I think, is irrelevant. So we got way afield on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what the Cold War would do.
Yeah. We'll do that.
Brett shows up on the show.
Yeah, I know. And
wild card.
He's a wild card. I don't know if this is going to work out. All right. Bring us back together here, Brian. What about, let's
Bring us
talk
back
about
together.
Demi Lovato. I
Yes.
really
I think
don't.
the
Those are
core-
words I never thought would come out of my mouth.
So
let's talk about Demi Lovato. Ugh.
So full disclosure, some might describe Demi Lovato as a former coworker of mine because we've both cut checks from the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure when people ask Demi Lovato about her time at Disney, she's like, you mean when I worked with Brian Chai? Yeah, I'm sure that's what's happening.
Well, given that, George, my former coworker probably would not appreciate you calling they a her.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused already. Demi Lovato came out today to the typical expected fanfare of announcing that she identifies as non-binary. I was trying to remember the exact one. So non-binary, which I had to do some research for this, and it was kind of a sketchy thing to look up on my work computer. But essentially, it boils down to just not identifying as a man or a woman.
Right.
And Demi Lovato insisted on new pronouns, a new batch of pronouns, they, them, their.
Yeah.
I've never really understood identifying as more than a single person. That's always been weird to me.
Yeah, Demi
Grammatically, that's
Lovato.
interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Demi Lovato came out as a person who doesn't know how language works.
Yes. But, I saw this story and it just sort of made me think, like, here we go again. So, Brett, I'll kick this over to you first. Like, what, and I know this is something you want to talk about because you were bothering me before we went on air.
Well, he has all her albums.
That's
so,
true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
super
he,
fan.
Yeah,
Super fan.
I think he buys it all on vinyl. Actually, that was what I was told.
8-track vinyl, CD, iTunes.
That's what I was told. I'm just, going by what I was told.
You're just the messenger.
I'm just messing.
But yeah, Brett. So, like, what?
Why?
Why is Lovato doing this? What's the benefit? It just feels like this is the millionth time a celebrity has come out. We were all talking about Elliot Page not that
Yes.
long ago.
Well, we weren't all talking about
well,
Elliot Page, but yeah.
The artist formerly known as
I was working
Ellen
really
Page.
hard not to talk about Elliot Page.
Fair enough. I don't blame you for that. But the point being is, like, this periodically happens. There's a lot of, self-congratulation. And then nothing. Like, why? Well, why? What's with this cycle? Why do we keep going through it? Why do we keep giving celebrities? I mean, they have enough fame and attention
Yes.
as it is. They
And
don't,
money.
And-
and money. Yeah.
Why
Let's
must
not
we
forget
dedicate
money.
more time and
Right.
attention to the? I don't know. In short, I don't know.
That's fair.
And I don't care when they say these things. Genuinely,
And that's why he works here, folks.
you do.
He doesn't care either.
Just live and let live is the. I come from maybe more of a libertarian faction. So it's for me, live and let live. However, every great intellectual thinker, statesman rolls over in their grave when they see the American political psyche look at this as this is the preeminent battleground on which public affairs are fought, and that's what gets me a little bit more heated. Is why is there so much attention, resource, and time, money spent towards this day?
Oh, I can answer that question. It's because she's got a good publicist.
Yes,
That's why.
They need a raise, maybe.
Yeah. What we need to remember here is that any individual who doesn't know what gender they are has a mental illness. It's diagnosable. It exists. It's called gender dysphoria. And I don't mean to make light of Demi Lovato. Look, Demi Lovato is a almost quintessential child star. If you look at her history, she's been in and out of rehab. She fairly recently admitted that she's been clean for 6 years. I think she said that in March, and then in July was back in rehab. Actually, that was last year, I think. 3 months later was back in rehab, and a year later, I've been clean for a year, but I still drink and smoke pot. I think you're defining clean differently than I do. And I'm going to continue to call her she, has made a significant number of announcements coming out in one way or another about being bisexual, about having dated a woman, I think the only engagements she's had have been to men. I'm no Demi Lovato expert, so don't hold me to that either. But this is a woman with clear mental health and addiction issues. She shouldn't be held up as an example or a poster child of anything except not being a child star. She's a great example of why you don't want to be a child star. I don't want to denigrate her too much because she needs help. And I don't want to just attack her. I will not hesitate to attack the left, which is thrilled to use her, a mentally ill person, to make political points and to push their agenda. I have no trouble attacking the left for that. But that's, she's the victim in that sense. I will also note, cynically, Well, first of all, I'll note two things. One, Josh Manning, deputy managing editor here, when we heard the news this morning about Demi Lovato coming out as non-binary, his response was, quote, Demi Lovato comes out as in search of attention, which I think is exactly right. I think that was the right take on it.
Yep.
And then my first thought, and I actually asked my editorial assistant, I said, I haven't listened to pop music since probably 1998, I'm going to guess, something like that. I said, so
That's
I know
when Backstreet Boys' Millennium album came out.
I know who Demi Lovato is because of Camp Rock and Sunny with a Chance, which are Disney Channel movie and show, which my daughter watched. So I know the name, but I don't know anything about her. So I asked Cassie, has she put out an album recently? Is it just coincidence that she's coming out with this big announcement? And guess what? It's a huge coincidence.
I'm sure.
But her newest album just came out. So what are
the odds?
What are the odds? Exactly. It's just amazing that these things happen. Look, Ms. Lovato, please get some help. Please get some help. You need help. And I'm not talking about the healer you keep claiming to see. That's not the kind of help you need. You need real help from somebody who went to a real school and got a real degree and is qualified to give you real help. You need it, and your life will be better if you get it.
It's true. She should probably look up Joe Sedian. I think Joe could probably help her out.
Joe Sedian, it would probably be very helpful, but he's so handsome.
That's true.
That she may just be distracted the whole time. I don't know.
He's out of her league.
Yeah, I don't know if she could focus on the help he was giving her.
So I guess the last question I just wanted to bring real quick, guys, then is so the question I always go back to every time this happens, invariably, is in my head I'm thinking, okay, so what's the left's plan here? Because all of this just seems so antithetical to they want to normalize this stuff, right? So in a normal world, no one's going to be like, Brian Chai announces he's a dude. Okay, cool. I'm not going to get any pats on the back, maybe from George. I'm not going to get any pats on the back. I'm not going to get any, celebrity auditions. I'm not, trying to sell an album. Does the left not realize that they are inherently just undermining their whole agenda? Is this a thought that crosses their mind? Not saying either of you guys are leftists, but if you had to step into their shoes for 5 minutes.
You're asking leftists to make sense. That's a problem.
Fair enough.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there's a certain level of hypocrisy here where people are saying, hey, this is really normal. Let's celebrate it. We don't celebrate normal things. We just acknowledge them and move on, right? So I think there is just a sort of bizarre disconnect. Literally what the left should do if they want to normalize this is they should kind of yawn when somebody makes an announcement like this. Who cares what you do you. Yep. That should kind of be their thing. Let the folks on the right, let the crazy old traditional people like me make the fuss about it.
Yeah. The hypocrisy is quite loud. At the end of the day, though, it's so odd that they wear the identity sleeve like it's Superman. Like it's a Superman cape. Like, this is my identity. This is the defining way of me. This is, without my identity, I'm nothing. And that's always just struck me. It's so odd. I'm like, well, what are your convictions? What are your beliefs? Like, what do you think?
Right.
To me, I'm like, oh, cool. You're gay. I don't care. What do you think?
Yeah.
So it's so frustrating to see it get further incentivized every single day. When she comes out and celebrates this new thing, and everybody flocks to her, and it just reaffirms. And the younger generations coming up see this as a point, like, oh, this is how I become somebody famous.
Yeah.
I think that probably is one of the more worrying things about all this. Is like maybe that's the left's end game. Like, yeah, this is hypocritical, and it's glaringly hypocritical for all to see, but they don't care about that because you know what? Kids dig Demi Lovato. They like her songs, and you know what? If she's normal, then that's what kids are going to think growing up. As fans of her, and sinister, but I will tip my cap to a nefarious plot when it deserves one. And that's
there's something to be said for that. Actually, the left has managed to normalize one thing, and that's its own hypocrisy. But we really don't talk about it all that much. We don't even really notice it anymore because it's just like, oh yeah, well, of course they said that. What else would we expect them to say? So I think we will end there in the interest of time, and because I just don't want to talk about Demi Lovato anymore. I'm just done with her. Please get
Them.
help, Demi.
You're done with them.
No, I'm not. No, I'm done with her. She can be done with them all you want. I'm done with her. Thank you for joining us on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We ask you, as we always do, if you're watching us on YouTube, please click that subscribe button, click the bell so you're notified when new episodes go live on the platform. If you're not watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to us somewhere else perhaps, thank you for doing that. But please do the same. Please subscribe. We look at our numbers every week, every day, really. We know there are lots of you watching and listening who haven't subscribed, but that subscription really helps us out, and it helps us get this information out to you. You guys know, I don't have to tell you, if you're watching WJ Live, you know big tech doesn't want you watching WJ Live. You've heard us say it so many times, and you knew it before we told you anyway. One thing that helps us get to you are those subscription buttons. It doesn't sound like much, doesn't cost you a dime, but it does help us get this information out to you. And so we hope that you would do that. You really are doing us a favor. We appreciate it. We also appreciate you joining us here today for this episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And so we will see you again on, what's today? Today's Wednesday. We'll see you again on Friday, and every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from now until we decide to do something different, which, you know, we may come out as a them.
Until our podcast producer extraordinaire, Kayla Kunkel,
yeah,
decides that she doesn't want to deal with us anymore.
Oh, yeah. So that's probably 20 minutes,
Yeah.
especially after this episode. Probably about 20 minutes. She's probably en route to my house already with Victoria to cover it with toilet paper.
She has threatened to TP George's house.
Yes. See, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure if threat's even the right word. Sound more like a promise. Anyway, thank you for joining us here on WJ Live. We'll see you next time. Stay safe.
Hey guys, huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.